we stand before the dark and foreboding castle of the Demon Lord, where a group of adventurers finally arrives at the gate after discovering the enemy leader's location. The group's mage says that Yuga is capable of leading the team to victory, so he calls his companions together for this final battle. With that, the castle gate opens, and red eyes can be seen along with ghastly groans echoing from inside. Yet without showing a trace of fear, Yuga enters with his friends, and they immediately come face to face with one of the Demon Lord's bodyguards, one of his minions, who displays an unsettling confidence despite being vastly outnumbered. The mage casts a spell at him, but the demon cancels it with incredible ease. Next, a warrior steps forward and unleashes several sword strikes, but the opponent is fast enough to evade each attack and then kick the swordsman back into place. Then a companion casts a support spell on Yuga to increase his power, and he feels ready to attack with his Excalibur skill. At that moment, the demon counters with Infinite Darkness, a spell so strong it instantly devours Yuga's attack and explodes over the adventurers. After taking such overwhelming damage, Yuga wonders if this is the end as he slowly closes his eyes. Meanwhile, the demon approaches the group and is left speechless by the beauty of the priestess. At that moment, one of his subordinates asks their captain if they should finish off the enemies, and the superior jolts, remembering he had ordered the minions to stay hidden. The three underlings notice their leader staring strangely at the girl, but he insists he is only deciding what to do with the four adventurers. The minions assumed they would eliminate the humans, but the captain instead orders them to dump the enemies in a nearby village. And as the beautiful priestess is carried outside, the demon feels the sadness of parting with such a lovely woman. A month later, one of the Demon Lord's right-hand men asks Yoki how many times those unbearable heroes have tried to get past him, and the captain answers Lord Zackle that he has been challenged exactly 13 times. Zackle says those heroes are worthless if they keep losing to someone like Yoki, then bursts out laughing, triggering laughter from the other demons around him. The Demon Lord asks why Yoki hasn't killed the heroes, and he explains that useless people like them aren't worth the effort. If that's the case, the Lord says he'll let Yoki's subordinates handle it, but knowing they won't be able to defeat the heroes, and not wanting to kill that beautiful girl, Yoki promises he'll take care of it. Upon leaving the throne room, Yoki thinks to himself that the heroes' lives will be in danger if he spares them again. Ironically, Yoki is strong enough to hold off the entire quartet alone, but they certainly have enough power to defeat the Demon Lord. In any case, while he reflects on the situation, the entire world is being controlled by his master, and it's best to resolve this before those humans truly find themselves in hot water. The next day, Yuga and his companions return to challenge the Demon Lord's guardian again. Calling Raven to attack with him in a new strategy, the leader forms a duo to corner the opponent. But Yoki is too strong to restrain and ends up slamming both of them into the wall. Seeing that things look bad, the priestess runs to heal her allies and tells Makana to hold the enemy off as long as possible. To make sure the demon stays away, the sorceress fires her strongest spells at Yoki, but none of them work, giving the unwanted guests a small break. Yoki waits for the girl to heal her friends before delivering a threatening speech. Once back on his feet, Yuga asks Cecilia to buff him, and once she does, he uses Excalibur again, this time gathering a far greater amount of energy in hopes of finally defeating the enemy who has been the group's biggest obstacle. After Excalibur detonates on top of the demon, Yuga watches closely to see the result. But as the smoke clears, completely unharmed, Yoki asks when these humans will finally understand they cannot defeat him. Yuga replies that they must bring down the Demon Lord at any cost. In that case, Yoki demands they leave the priestess in the castle, and then he'll let the others pass. Naturally, Yuga refuses, but Makana tries to convince him otherwise. They have no chance against this man, and as difficult as it is, someone must choose between the life of one priestess and the life of the entire world. Hearing this, Yuga becomes anxious, trying to think of a solution. But Cecilia tells her friends to go ahead and sacrifices herself for the group. Yuga promises to come back for her later, and Yoki keeps his word and opens the door for the heroes to pass. When the three leave, the priestess knows she doesn't come close to matching this enemy, but she promises to fight to the end as she fires a holy laser at Yoki. The demon absorbs the attack and quickly raises his hands in surrender, saying his name to the human. She asks why anyone would introduce themselves to someone they are about to kill, and he explains that if he really wanted to kill her or her companions, he would have done it long ago. In truth, he gathers courage to confess that he fell in love with her from the first moment he saw her, and so he invites her on a date. Terrified by this bombshell, Cecilia screams and apologizes to the demon. Thinking that was a no, Yoki concludes he has no chance and starts planning his self-immolation for later. Meanwhile, assuming the demon is pretending to be nice so he can strike her from behind, the priestess tries to attack first as he turns around, but she gives up when she notices that he truly isn't trying to resist. She asks him why, and he says there's no reason left to live after being rejected by the one he loved. Besides, even if he stays alive, all he has to do in life is remain inside that room to protect the Lord. And he doesn't even have permission to go out and attack human villages. Still, truth be told, he doesn't even want to do that. Cecilia accuses the demon of lying, because all demons are cruel, including their leader, who wants to dominate and destroy humanity. Yoki explains that he may look like a demon, but he was actually reincarnated from another world and is human on the inside. Since that's the case, the girl asks why he serves the demon lord if he could defeat him with his vast power. Yoki explains that if he did that, he would be appointed as the next lord, something he doesn't want. Because of that, Yoki spends his life confined every day, with no chance to do anything. What he wanted was to put an end to his own pathetic life. But that changed when he met Cecilia, who gave him the feeling of what it truly means to be alive for the first time. However, now that he has been rejected, he has once again lost the desire to continue living. Even so, Cecilia says he shouldn't feel that way, since he has the power to turn this war around. And if he really has even a little humanity inside him, he should use that strength to change the course of the battle against the demons. With that, inviting him to fight by her side around the world, the priestess extends her hand and says there is still time. Sometime later, in the Kingdom of Clarity, the group of heroes sent to the Demon King's castle is decorated by the king for their incredible feat of defeating the enemy leader. For that reason, That's Orda Clarity, with his authority as the highest ruler of that kingdom, declares the beginning of a 3-day celebration to commemorate the victory. Meanwhile, watching the royal capital from afar, Yoki rips off his own horn, presenting themselves to the people after their act of bravery. The group of heroes parades through the crowd. Yuga says they wouldn't have won if not for Cecilia, and that makes Mirika jealous. Back to Yoki. After removing from his body anything that would imply he was a demon, the young man goes to the city's adventurers guild and asks to register at the counter. Out of patience and clearly not knowing exactly what he's doing, the attendant finds the form, and Yoki fills it out without delay, receiving the guild identity card that classifies him as an F-rank adventurer, still a long way from rank S, the highest rank that can be reached if a newcomer completes enough missions. The clerk also tells the kid not to lose that thing, especially over the next 3 days, because the rest of the staff was released for the festival and he'll have to deal with everything alone. Anyway, the man introduces himself as Clayman and wishes the rookie luck. Later, at an inn, Yoki throws a good amount of coins onto a table and, satisfied with the money he earned on his first day, believes he could live a stable life in the human world and, above all, confess to Cecilia again and get a chance to go on a date with her. Sometime later, upon entering the guild, Yoki hears 2 adventurers talking about a boy who is rising in rank extremely fast. That very boy walks up to Clayman with 5 different missions and says he came to collect all the rewards, while the clerk wants to know why this kid always insists on being served by him, even when there's a cute girl right next to him ready to help. Yoki explains that he got used to Clayman, and besides, he works fast. Putting that aside, Clayman asks who this boy really is, and he nervously replies that he's just an ordinary adventurer, not falling for that nonsense. Clayman doesn't believe someone who rose from rank F to D in just 1 week can be called ordinary. Still, since the boy hasn't done anything illegal, the attendant can't investigate him or anything like that, so he drops the matter. At that moment, disguised so she won't be recognized, Cecilia walks up to the counter and invites Yoki to her house to talk. Obviously, the supposed demon isn't going to let that chance slip away. So shortly afterward they arrive at the adventurer's mansion by carriage. One of the gate guards, as always, is eager for the beautiful Cecilia to return so he can admire her angelic face again, but when he sees a kid stepping out of her carriage, the big guy approaches him with hostility and asks what he's doing inside Miss Cecilia's carriage. The lady of the house appears to scold the guard, while another guard pulls him away before things get worse. Inside the mansion, the priestess apologizes, since she should have found Yoki earlier, but he doesn't regret the time spent as an adventurer, because he was having a lot of fun. He's actually surprised she managed to find him. and she explains that Yoki has become the city's main topic in the last few days because he rose in rank in the blink of an eye. And speaking of that, Cecilia says that's exactly what she wanted to talk about. She wants him to leave the Adventurers Guild. She explains that even though the Demon Lord has been defeated, it's not as if all dangers in the world disappeared along with him. And it's a fact that the human nations will soon restart their usual conflicts in search of supremacy. The signs are clear. For example, Yuga has begun receiving several marriage proposals from other nations. And Yoki understands why, as if the guy didn't already have premium skin. Now he's the most popular man in the world at the moment. However, Cecilia explains that those proposals go far beyond that, since marriages with important figures are simply a way to gain more power and influence in the human world. And the kingdom that has the great hero by its side will have an ally capable of turning the tide of a war. Obviously, Yoki will become one of this kingdom's S-rank adventurers sooner or later. But the moment the boy reaches that rank, every eye will turn toward him, and if they find out he's a demon, they might try to use his power to conquer the world. For that reason, the priestess wishes Yoki wouldn't draw so much attention, and that he would at least advance more slowly within the guild. Since he shows no interest in leaving, she could simply hire him and pay him with the money she receives from her work. But she doesn't have the budget to sustain an adventurer who earns the same as an S rank. In return, she kneels and promises she would do anything if Yoki accepts her proposal. Faced with that, acting like a complete idiot because he clearly has no idea how to deal with the girl he loves in that position. The boy makes it clear that it would be hilarious to imagine him falling for the sweet talk of any random little nation, because it's obvious crystal clear that he only has eyes for his beautiful and beloved Cecilia. After laughing at the boy's reaction, the girl is pleased with his answer, until someone knocks on the office door and walks in. It's Celia Aquarain, who introduces herself as Cecilia's mother. Yoki holds himself back so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of his future mother-in-law, while Celia explains that Sophia, one of her maids, will deal with the guard who disrespected Yoki at the gate. The kid imagines that a big guy like that won't learn any lesson coming from a defenseless little kitten like Sophia, while Celia is actually discussing with the maid how many of the guard's bones should remain intact. After settling the matter and dismissing the maid, Celia reveals that her daughter has received many marriage proposals, including one from the hero himself, Yuga, who apparently has a massive crush on the girl. Yoki goes crazy and swears he'll show everyone who the real monster is here, but Cecilia tells him to cool it, because she already turned down all marriage offers, including the hero's. Seeing that this young man clearly likes her daughter, Celia approaches him and proposes that Yoki marry Cecilia. Extremely nervous, Yoki looks at his beloved and apologizes for what he's about to say. But since he already confessed to her once and was rejected, what he wants now is to rise in life as an adventurer, and once he's stable in his profession, confess to her again, because he wants to respect her feelings. Hearing that, Celia says the boy passed the test, because she would never let her daughter marry someone who thought otherwise. Because of that, the lady of the house makes it clear that Yoki is always welcome in her home. After this conversation, Yoki and Cecilia meet in the garden to say their goodbyes. And after everything that was said in that room, to the demon's delight, they decide that from now on they'll address each other by their first names, a big step in intimacy for the two of them. Sometime later, a titanic battle was taking place in a random forest, where Yoki was fighting a chicken with a serpent's tail. After dodging the monster's attacks with a smile on his face, the young demon counterattacked with lightning magic and completed his mission by collecting the cockatrice's feathers. According to Clayman, Yoki would need a week to finish this job, but the boy bragged after needing only a single day. However, while he was boasting about it, Yoki was attacked by a headless knight and narrowly escaped the sword strike. Then, a harpy tried to attack him from above, but was pushed back by the demon's wind magic. As if that weren't enough, a fairy tried to ambush Yoki from behind with a knife in hand. But Yoki managed to warn Shaik that it was him. Recognizing the captain, Shaik scratched his head for having thought he was some adventurer hunting demons. Along with the fairy, Happiness the harpy and Duke the headless knight also recognized their boss. Duke grumbled that Yoki had disappeared out of nowhere after the demon lord was defeated and asked why he looked human, with the whole group demanding a good explanation. Yoki explained that he confessed his love to the priestess from the hero's party and was rejected, which messed with his head and made him decide to become Yoki, a human adventurer. Therefore, his subordinates were now free to take whatever form they wanted. Honestly, none of the three liked this idea, and Duke even wanted to meet the girl the captain was so in love with. On the other hand, Yaoki needed to hide who he really was and couldn't be walking around with a guy carrying his own head, a girl with pigeon wings instead of arms, and a kid with mosquito wings. Still, since the boss managed it, the three also thought they could. So, Yaoki demanded that his subordinates be ready for anything. But right at the start of this new journey, when Yaoki met Cecilia again at her house, the girl scolded him for plucking Happiness's feathers, which is considered a serious crime for a harpy. Later, Yaoki, Cecilia, and Duke sat down for tea, while the other two played in the backyard. Cecilia thought Yaoki's subordinates didn't look like demons, so Duke explained that he was a Dullahan, Happiness was a harpy, and Shike was a pixie. He even wanted to take off his head to show the girl, but it was stuck to his helmet and armor. Yaoki complained that his companion talked too much and didn't act like a proper Dullahan, and the subordinate replied that this was the captain's fault. In fact, he hadn't liked the captain at first. Back when Yaoki was known for being a recluse, when Duke's superior, Zekier, entered the boy's room to order him to kill some humans, Yaoki responded aggressively and refused, so he was sent to solitary confinement. Since that kind of behavior was unacceptable for a demon, Duke was told to deal with the kid. But besides losing the fight, he also lost the argument, because Yaoki filled his severed head with a bunch of ideas. In any case, Duke and the others had become very fond of their boss. Speaking of Shike and Happiness, the two had disappeared, and Yaoki feared they had entered the mansion, where their true identities could be discovered. Because of that, the trio went looking for them and found Shike on the lap of Celia Aquarain, Cecilia's mother. Yaoki asked if the boy had caused trouble, but the woman loved children and had simply kept him company while he ran around the garden, until he got tired and fell asleep. Cecilia then asked about the girl who had been with Shike, so Celia explained that Sophia had taken her away, leaving the trio worried. Meanwhile, after dressing the girl according to the job, Sophia was telling Happiness that she had talent for being a maid until Cecilia arrived with the others and said that the girl was a friend of Yaoki's. Sophia apologized, thinking Happiness was the new maid scheduled to come that day, so Yaoki asked the harpy to change out of the outfit. But she refused and confessed she had always wanted a job and ambitions in life. So she was delighted when Sophia promised to show her the servants' quarters in the mansion. Since Happiness had decided not to leave, the others headed out and said goodbye to the new maid of Cecilia's mansion. During the farewell, Celia whispered to Yaoki that her daughter, besides being the priestess of the hero's party, also had connections with important people. Since she hadn't been resting much lately, the mother would make Cecilia take a day off tomorrow, so it would be nice if Yaoki invited her out. The next morning, embarrassed, Yaoki waited for Cecilia to arrive for their outing, and when she showed up in a carriage, the boy couldn't help falling even more in love with her different look. He commented that the glasses suited her, and Cecilia explained they were part of her disguise, since it would be a problem if people found out she belonged to the hero's party. Yaoki knew she was a kind of celebrity for being part of that group, and although she apologized for involving him in it, he assured her he would do everything to make her day off wonderful. Soon after, as they walked through the city streets, Cecilia asked for a new cake at a cafe, and, after looking at the sweets inside, it would be a great idea to stop by later. Then, she was enchanted by some flowers at a flower shop, and Yaoki couldn't stop thinking that she was much more beautiful than them. And after that, when she found an animal on the street and petted it, she said the creature was adorable. But Yaoki held himself back from saying who he really thought was adorable in that moment. Next, the potential couple visited a clothing store so Cecilia could try on some outfits, which only increased the attraction Yaoki already felt for her. When they left the store, Cecilia confessed that the everyday life she was enjoying with him had achievement as if scored the. At that moment, they come across an accessory shop and decide to step inside. While they're looking around, a guy recognizes Cecilia and shouts her name. So a woman quickly covers his mouth and calls him every name she can think of. Cecilia turns toward the voice and realizes that the ones who called her are Yuuga and Mikana, her teammates. Yuuga walks over and says he's also taking a stroll while enjoying a rare day off after so long, and even throwing a bit of charm her way, he invites the priestess to join him, something that immediately makes Yaoki jealous. Cecilia says she's with a beta friend today, so Yuuga goes up to Yaoki, looks him over from head to toe, and asks if they haven't met before. Yaoki denies it, saying it was just his imagination, but Yuuga lets it go and invites him to join the outing anyway. then pulls Cecilia into the accessory shop. Mikana, after complaining that this was supposed to be her chance to go out with the hero after such a long time, refers to Yaoki as a boring, ordinary citizen and tells him to do his best during this outing with the priestess. Depending on how things go, maybe Yuuga will give up on Cecilia and pay more attention to the mage instead, though she doesn't expect much from someone as dull as Yaoki. Annoyed with the mage while the other three are inside the shop, Yaoki thinks about how, according to what he heard, Cecilia rejected the hero's marriage proposal. Yet Yuuga still doesn't seem to have given up. But just because he's a hero doesn't mean Yaoki plans to give up either. With that winner's mindset, the demon walks into the store and asks his beloved if she found anything she liked, since he wanted to give her a gift to thank her for the other day. Listening closely, and visibly bothered by how the two are interacting, Yuuga cuts in and promises to buy an amazing present for Cecilia and for Mikana. Nervous because of this competition that Yuuga is forcing, Yaoki notices an interesting necklace and shows it to Cecilia, who blushes because she really likes it. In turn, Yuuga shows her a hair ornament, the most expensive accessory in the shop. So big it practically looks like a shield. Anxious to put it on her right away, the hero pulls her hat off, accidentally knocking off her glasses as well. The disguise gone, the people in the shop immediately recognize her as a member of the hero's party. In no time, even people outside hear the shouting and rush in to get a piece of Yuuga and Mikana when they hear the two are inside that shop. The three of them run off to escape the crowd, while Yaoki is simply left behind in the middle of the confusion, abandoned and alone. Even so, he doesn't give up and goes after the woman he loves. But instead of finding her, he comes across someone else, someone who is also loved by many women. This is Raven, the fourth member of the hero's party, who makes women swoon wherever he goes, even though he himself doesn't seem comfortable with it. Yaoki doesn't really know who he is, so a man next to him explains that besides being part of the hero's team, Raven is the commander of the knights. Seeing that the poor guy is in trouble, Yaoki points in one direction and shouts that the hero went that way, making the girls around Raven run off toward the spot he indicated. After getting the swordsman out of the situation, Yaoki pulls him to a safe place and becomes irritated when saying goodbye, since Raven doesn't even bother to give him a single thank you. Raven, however, was avoiding speaking as much as possible because by thanking him, he would reveal his real voice, and then it becomes clear why he's always so quiet. In reality, Raven has a somewhat teenage-sounding voice, which doesn't exactly give off a very masculine or imposing image. Because of that, and because some people laugh at his voice, he avoids conversations altogether, showing empathy. Yaoki says that everyone has something they want to hide. After all, he's a demon and knows that very well, though of course he doesn't say that part to the human, since only his mother and cousins were the ones who never laughed at his voice. Raven asks if Yaoki wants to be his friend. Despite the initial awkwardness at such a sudden and strange invitation, the demon accepts it normally and greets his new companion kindly. But remembering that he was in the middle of a chase, he hurriedly says goodbye to the swordsman and resumes running after Cecilia. After searching for some time, the poor demon is about to give up, while Cecilia, who is also looking for him, wonders if he has already gone home. Suddenly, she comes across a little boy crying alone in the street, and the first thing she does is heal a scrape on his knee. When the boy says that his mother disappeared, Yaoki appears out of nowhere like some sort of improvised social hero, and with an awkwardly forced laugh, he tells the child to stop crying because the great adventurer Yaoki will find his mother even if he has to search every corner of the entire world. Cecilia becomes irritated with her friend's childish behavior and scolds him for not realizing how serious the moment is. But Yaoki's intention was exactly to act that way so the child would cheer up, which ends up working, since the boy starts laughing. Although, in truth, he's laughing not because of the improvised hero act, but because of the scolding Yaoki just got. So, Yaoki and Cecilia go off to look for the boy's mother, though Yaoki is worried that people might recognize the girl again and cause another commotion. However, she assures him she'll handle it if it happens again, so the pair resumes what they were doing with more peace of mind. Meanwhile, somewhere else nearby, even though he's with Mikana, Yuuga is only concerned with finding Cecilia. While the mage complains that he's going to cause another scene and attract a crowd again, annoyed with her, Yuuga decides to ditch Mikana and go after the priestess no matter what, leaving the poor girl alone. It doesn't take long before he finds Cecilia next to Yaoki, returning the child to his mother. The woman has a genuinely warm smile on her face and seems to be exactly where she should be, while Yuuga looks behind him and finally realizes that Mikana is no longer with him. The next day, Yaoki is invited to Cecilia's mansion by her mother. Once there, Celia explains that her daughter fainted not only because of her hectic routine, but also because of yesterday's commotion, which was the final straw. Still, Celia assures him it wasn't Yaoki's fault, since it was just a cold. On the other hand, the woman believes that the little hero has quite a bit of blame for throwing Cecilia into that mess. And as if that weren't enough, she heard that when he found out Cecilia wasn't feeling well, he came all the way to the house to try to take care of her, but Sophia managed to stop him and send him away. At that moment, Yaoki wonders who the hell this Sophia is to have blocked the hero himself. Even so, knowing how hard the boy tried yesterday for her daughter, Celia asks if Yaoki would like to see how she's doing. Yaoki, of course, doesn't waste the invitation and is escorted by Sophia to the priestess's room. When the maid knocks on the door and announces that Yaoki has come to visit, the girl panics and asks for a few seconds to tidy herself up. When he enters the room, Yaoki apologizes for dragging her into that confusion, even knowing how tired she was. Cecilia, in turn, pretends that it really was his fault and, as compensation, asks him to accompany her on her next day off, which makes him feel like he just won the lottery. Because of that, acting as if he were a hero, he promises not to fail again next time and asks the maiden to enjoy the peace of her colorful cocoon while he eagerly awaits their second journey together. Cecilia bursts out laughing at the guy's nonsense. But when she starts coughing, Sophia appears instantly, puts him in a chokehold, and demands that he not speak so loudly so he doesn't harm the young lady's health. In fact, Sophia throws the boy out of the house as if he were a bag of trash, and Happiness herself closes the door in the captain's face, pointing out how powerless he seems now. After being kicked out, Yaoki finds Raven outside, and the swordsman asks for advice about someone he has grown very fond of. According to him, instead of laughing, this person said they were jealous of Raven's beautiful voice. But he doesn't have the courage to take the relationship to the next stage. Realizing the guy is just as insecure as his teenage-sounding voice suggests, Yaoki shakes him and yells that, besides being handsome and tall, he is one of the heroes who saved the world. So now that he has even received a compliment about his voice, he has everything he needs to take action. Motivated by his friend's words, Raven is convinced to go after the person he loves, and that's when Yaoki notices he's entering Cecilia's house, which can only mean something very annoying. Realizing he may have accidentally encouraged a rival, Yaoki begins to panic, and even though part of his mind tries to convince him that Cecilia would never pay attention to that guy, it's impossible not to think that, besides being handsome, the man is part of the hero's party, where the two might end up getting quite close in some specific scene in which Raven catches the priestess to prevent her from falling and promises to protect her above all else. However, once he notices, Yaoki sees Raven walking past him completely devastated and announcing that he's giving up. Right away, Yaoki goes back to Cecilia's door and throws a little excuse at Sophia, saying he was worried about the young lady's condition, but he knows full well that the fact he had just left the mansion makes the whole thing very suspicious. The maid makes it clear that her mistress is resting and that the man should return another day. So Yaoki gathers the courage to ask whether Raven had been there. Sophia explains that the swordsman came and asked to call Happiness, which makes Yaoki realize it wasn't exactly what he had imagined. Even so, he needed confirmation. So he went to see his former subordinate to ask her directly whether the red-haired boy had confessed to the harpy. Happiness responds only with the word impossible, which makes everything a bit confusing. And no matter how much the demon tries to unravel the true meaning behind that, the girl not only repeats the same word, but also ends up running off for no reason at all. Still unhappy with those loose ends, Yaoki has the nerve to summon his teammates just so he can question them about the matter. After hearing more or less what happened, Shike remembers that Raven was the swordsman who kept getting beaten over and over by his captain. Duke explains that even if humans tell Happiness they like her, that shouldn't spark positive feelings, since harpies are often captured to be enslaved because of their beauty, or hunted so their feathers can be removed. Because of that, this race tends to be very careful with anyone who approaches them. In fact, Happiness ended up as part of the Demon Lord's army, because Duke saved her while she was being chased by humans. Even so, Shike doesn't think the harpy hates humans, since there are kind people among them, and she even became a maid in Cecilia's mansion because she liked the people who live there. In the end, Yaoki agrees with Shike and points out that Raven isn't a bad guy either. Later, when he goes to the guild, the demon notices that Clayman isn't working. A receptionist asks if he's the guy who's always talking to the vice guild master. But seeing that the boy has no idea who she's referring to, The employee explains that she means Clayman, and that Clayman is the vice guild master of the Adventurers Guild. Yaoki makes that face of disbelief, unwilling to accept that the lazy complainer is the second most important person in the establishment. And the woman fully understands how he feels. The demon wants to know where Clayman is, and whispering because this is a matter concerning the guild's dignity, the woman says that the vice guild master has been hospitalized. Without delay, Yaoki goes to visit the man and greets him by already calling him vice master. When asked why he's all banged up, Clayman explains that he made his wife angry. Yaoki assumes it was the classic example of a toxic relationship in which the woman plays the role of aggressor, and Clayman explains that it was recently their wedding anniversary. He was choosing a gift but became so unsure about what would actually be nice that he ended up not buying anything at all, not only arriving home empty-handed but also late for their scheduled dinner. Because of that, his wife thought he had forgotten their anniversary and gave him a real beating, which confirms the demon's suspicion and makes him understand why the receptionist shared the story in secret. Yaoki comments that Clayman's wife seems pretty strong, and he explains that she is a former rank adventurer, just like he was. Actually, the two formed a duo in the past and were known as the Invincible and Apathetic Couple, a nickname Yaoki honestly thinks is not cool in the slightest. Either way, the demon offers to heal the man with his magic, but Clayman refuses, saying this is an opportunity for his wife to take good care of him. Speak of the devil, much to the demon's surprise. The one who suddenly shows up calling Clayman darling is none other than Sophia, Cecilia's tough-as-nails maid. Clayman receives his sweetie with all his heart and affection, but immediately gets a heel strike to the skull, since he always calls her Sophia and now comes up with this sweetie business. At least he managed to see under his wife's skirt, which made it worth it for him. Outside the room where Clayman is hospitalized, Sophia thanks Yaoki for visiting her husband, and when asked about Cecilia, the maid explains that the fever has gone down and her mistress is already fine. Yaoki wants to know if he can visit his beloved today, but he finds out that she'll be out all day on business. Seeing that the priestess from the hero's party is even busier than he thought, Yaoki asks her maid whether girls really care about that whole gift thing. Outraged, the woman demands to know whether her husband said anything about it, and terrified, the demon remembers the time he gave Cecilia a necklace and how much she loved it. So Sophia assures him that the girl will be very happy if she receives something given from the heart. Excited by that, Yaoki heads out into the street and can only imagine what it would be like if he were also married to Cecilia, her wearing an apron and telling her husband that dinner is ready, or her coming home after work apologizing for being late. Actually, Yaoki doesn't understand why he imagined these scenes always taking place in his original world. Next, he goes to the knight's dormitory and finds Raven lying in his room as if he were on the brink of death because of his recent, depressing failure in front of the girl he loves. Since the swordsman wouldn't respond no matter what, Yaoki simply says the name Happiness, bringing the man back to reality. Explaining that he knows the harpy, the demon asks his friend to tell the story of how Raven started liking her. Raven then recalls that, on that day, he was patrolling alone when he saw Happiness being bothered by three rough-looking men who had cornered the poor girl in an alley. Noticing that Raven was watching them, one of the men attacked him, but Raven swept his legs out from under him in a humiliating way, sending him crashing chin first onto the ground. At that moment, another man realized they were standing in front of Raven, the commander of the knights and a member of the hero's party, so the trio ran off. Without expecting anything in return for saving her, the swordsman simply turned to leave, but Happiness tugged on his cape and thanked him. Without meaning to, Raven replied that he was just doing his job, revealing his almost childlike voice, which filled him with embarrassment. However, instead of reacting the way he imagined, the girl told him his voice was beautiful, and went even further. She said she envied his voice. After saying that, she hurried away. Remembering that moment, Raven thought her uniform looked familiar, and Yaoki adds that this was why the commander went to Cecilia's mansion. Raven doesn't understand how Yaoki knows Cecilia, so the demon ends up telling the story, or at least part of it. The human is impressed with his friend for having abandoned his hometown to go after the woman he loves, and for working hard as an adventurer to become someone worthy of her. By the way, the swordsman feels like a coward for not having done anything close to that, but his friend tells him not to feel down, especially because Happiness has a certain trauma involving humans, which makes dealing with her completely different. On that note, Raven believes his impulsive confession probably scared the girl a little, but Yaoki isn't so sure. He only knows his friend shouldn't give up on the one he loves. Wanting to cheer him up, He invites Raven to take a walk. Soon, the two arrive at a gift shop, where several couples are enjoying themselves as they pick out presents for each other. Raven wonders if the two of them don't look out of place, but Yaoki promises everything will be fine. He goes straight to the necklace he planned to give Cecilia and is happy to see it hasn't been sold yet. After securing the accessory, the demon notices his friend agonizing over choosing a worthy present for his beloved. But together they reach a consensus on what to give. Raven asks whether it wouldn't be frightening for the harpy to receive a gift from a man she barely knows. So Yaoki, acting as if he were some experienced charmer, teases him for not knowing and explains that women love receiving heartfelt gifts. Besides, according to the demon, the design of that accessory will suit happiness perfectly. Thus, Raven buys the item, communicating in writing so he doesn't have to use his voice. Then, before they can leave the shop, Makana runs into them and insinuates that the two are a couple buying gifts for each other. The provocation annoys Yaoki enough that he blurts out that they're buying gifts for the women they love. Hearing this, the mage already knew the boy had been interested in the priestess of her group the whole time, but she's surprised to learn that even Raven is in love. Since the commander didn't say anything, she realizes this is her fault after all. She laughed at his voice when they first met. Yaoki is surprised that this unbearable girl actually seems genuinely sorry for what she did. Since the people in the shop are about to start bothering the members of the hero's party, Makana calls the two boys to another place so they can explain the story better. However, when they arrive at a restaurant, the men's plan is to order a pile of food so they can stay busy eating and avoid telling the girl anything. Putting her counter strategy into action, Makana hints that she knows plenty about Cecilia, so Yaoki gives in and turns his attention to the mage, who wants to know how far he has gotten with the priestess. Even reluctantly, he explains that it's not like they're dating after all. Proposals of marriage come to her from every direction. Makana remembers Yuuga's proposal and how he's always bothering that girl, entering the women's room on purpose while they're changing, or pretending he mixed up the bath schedule to try to catch Cecilia off guard. As if that weren't enough, Makana expresses how irritated she gets when, at the end of some missions, Yuuga decides to stay an extra day in whatever village they're in just to give more attention to the girls who worship him. She then wants to know more about Raven's crush, but Yaoki steps in to protect his friend's pure love. That irritates the mage, because it makes her look like the villain of the story when her intention has always been to help somehow. Besides, she says, it's good to talk about these things sometimes. Using writing again, Raven asks if she also wants love advice, and when she pretends she doesn't, he assures her that Yaoki is trustworthy. So Makana gives in and reveals that Yuuga hates her because of how many times they were thrown out of the Demon Lord's castle. Speaking of that, she explains that the real enemy wasn't even the Demon Lord, it was the demon guarding the center of the castle, so strong that defeating him seemed impossible. Every time the hero's party was humiliated, they were taken to the nearest village and, for some reason, the members' wounds were completely healed, which only added to the shame. On the other hand, Makana says their team lied about the defeats. Instead of telling the villagers the truth, they claimed they were retreating and would return to the castle later, both to protect the group's reputation as the people's greatest hope and to preserve Yuuga's honor as the great hero. The people of the village had always helped with provisions for the expeditions. But after a month of defeat after defeat, the village supplies were almost completely running out, and the villagers' patience was already reaching its limit, which began to raise suspicions. That's when, to the hero group's surprise, that demon suggested an unexpected exchange. In order to allow them to pass into the Demon Lord's throne room, they would have to leave their party's priestess behind. It was Ma who convinced everyone to abandon Cecilia, and today she believes that this is why Yuuga never forgave her, because even though as if nothing happened, the sorceress can feel that the hero started treating her differently. Makana even believes that not even Yaoki should forgive her, knowing that she was the one who almost got the girl he loves killed. Suddenly, surprising everyone by using his voice, Raven asks Yaoki not to blame Makana, since the swordsman himself was also at fault for giving his opinion at the time. Speaking of which, he tells the girl that he's sorry. For his part, Yaoki doesn't have the nerve to judge the sorceress, especially because he was the reason for this whole mess. Makana herself doesn't know how to tell Cecilia what she feels, since she made her sacrifice herself to defend Yuuga's honor, something far too serious for someone to simply walk up and apologize for. Because of that, Yaoki advises Makana to open her heart to Cecilia so that this terrible tension between them doesn't continue. and the girl ends up believing that this really is the best path for things to improve. As the mage says goodbye after their meeting, Raven, encouraged by everything that just happened, decides he will go after happiness once more. Without wasting time, the two head to Cecilia's mansion and, by chance, run into Duke at the entrance. The Dullahan whose child Shaik was throwing a tantrum wanting to see Cecilia immediately scowls when he realizes he's standing in front of Raven, the guy who confessed to happiness and still had the nerve to come back even after being rejected. To avoid a fight, Yauki explains to the commander that Duke has a long history of protecting the Harpy, and the Headless Knight kept pressuring the human at every moment to take a stance on the matter, making it clear he wouldn't let anyone with bad intentions get close to his friend. Hearing that, Raven gathers all his strength and, using his voice, admits that he doesn't know happiness well enough and doesn't know what to say to her, even though he likes that woman a lot. Thinking that this would be the moment the man would say he would protect the Harpy with his life, Duke gives up on saying anything and tells him to just say whatever comes to mind. After literally pushing Raven toward happiness, Duke is questioned about his aggressive behavior, but he explains to Yauki that he was only testing the guy, since happiness also needs someone who can think for himself. In any case, Raven and happiness are once again standing before each other, and Raven is brave enough to apologize for what happened the other day and start over on the right foot this time. To do so, he places the gift in the girl's hands and asks that they become friends, and happiness accepts the accessory and shows herself open to him. Some time later, Shaik tries to cheer Yauki up by suggesting they stop by Celia's mansion, but the guy is devastated because Cecilia isn't there. In fact, he hasn't seen his beloved for a week, since, from what he's heard, everyone in the heroes group is busy. Cecilia is traveling through several cities and villages treating the wounded. Raven has become the leader of the knights. Mikana is a mage of the royal court, and Yuuga is busy with diplomacy and hunting high-level monsters. In other words, they're all scattered and unable to talk to each other, which Yauki considers to be his fault. Tired of the guys sulking, Shaik sits on his stomach as a form of protest. At that moment, Happiness enters the room to say that Cecilia will be at the mansion that afternoon, to the joy of the love-struck man, who finally has a chance to give her the necklace. Much more cheerful than before, Yauki goes out in the morning to walk around the city until the afternoon arrives, while Shaik goes ahead to the mansion with Happiness. Suddenly, the boy sees an elderly woman with a crystal ball who claims that his fortune for today is the worst possible, but obviously Yauki doesn't believe in that sort of thing. After all, he's going to see the woman he loves today, so it will be the best day of all. To start the morning on a high note, he stops by a sweets shop and is surprised by a huge, muscular man happily wearing a pink apron. Yauki asks where the usual clerk is, and the man says his sister had an appointment, so he had to take over the shop today. Scared by the guy's enthusiasm, Yauki orders some pastries, which are handed to him in the most aggressive way possible. Leaving the shop, all he wants is for the other clerk to come back soon, especially when he sees that his pastries were all squashed because of the way that Brute gave them to him. Still, at least the flavor was intact, which helped keep the demon in a good mood. His distraction ends up making him bump into a huge, unfriendly guy who almost beats him up even though Yauki didn't do anything serious. Right after escaping unharmed from the Brute, the anti-hero finds a pile of feces in the middle of the street and almost steps on it, which makes him realize he might really be unlucky today. To make matters worse, a kid is running while staring at his meat skewer, and completely out of control he crashes straight into Yauki and falls to the ground along with his food, which makes the child burst into tears. To calm him down, Yauki has to buy not one, but 2 skewers so the clumsy kid will stop making a scene. Finally, the boy leaves with a smile on his face, and the demon thinks his bad luck is gone, but what really goes away is his money pouch, which gets stolen right in front of him by a crook passing by. Immediately, using his powers, Yauki increases his speed to catch the thief and drop kicks him in the back, making him smash face first into a wall and pass out. Everything seems fine when the victim retrieves his money pouch, until none other than Yuuga appears right at that moment. Seeing the scene before him, he assumes Yauki is the real thief. Not recognizing him, the hero has the audacity to react with extreme violence against the suspect resisting arrest. After narrowly escaping several sword strikes, the demon tries to run away after losing his money, but he ends up surrounded by warriors accompanying the hero, so he has to surrender in the end. Thus, ending up in prison was the necessary event for poor Yauki to admit that the old lady was right about his day. In the middle of this, Duke shows up asking if the captain has ended up in a life of crime due to lack of attention from Cecilia. Happy to see a familiar face in this miserable place, the prisoner runs to the Dullahan, who says that Raven is investigating the situation and soon they'll have an answer. Yauki doesn't understand why Duke doesn't call Raven Commander, since he joined the Order of Knights. But Duke says that his only superior is Yauki, and since he calls him Commander in public, there's no problem. Meanwhile, an elf named Irene asks her companion to return to training, because the Vice Commander is angry that he left without permission. Before anything else, Duke asks for the cell keys, imagining that the commander must have already interrogated the real thief and that this unfair accusation against Yauki should have been resolved long ago. Irene confirms that Yauki has been declared innocent and hands over the key, also informing him that the hero would like to apologize to the real victim of the crime. Next, the poor guy is finally rewarded after a day full of trouble. Taken to a restaurant, he's treated to a real banquet entirely at his disposal. By the way, showing his usual outgoing and slightly intrusive nature, Yuuga admits that the one responsible for making him reflect on his actions was Raven, who scolded the hero harshly using nothing but words written on a sheet of paper. By the way, Yuuga finally realizes that the person he arrested was Yauki, the guy who was with Cecilia that day. He asks what their relationship is, and Yauki says they're just friends. Taking advantage of the situation, the hero asks the demon how to become friends with Cecilia, something he deeply wants but hasn't been able to do. Thinking for a moment, Yauki makes an annoyed face. After all, this guy is his biggest rival in love, and he wouldn't just hand over the secret to someone who would use it to get even closer to that woman. For that reason, Yauki says that he hasn't known Cecilia for long, and that Yuuga should ask someone who has been her friend for longer. Using paper and pencil, Raven writes Mikana's name, but Yuuga says that won't work, since the mage doesn't like Cecilia. That statement makes the two other men at the table tense up, because it says a lot and it fits perfectly with everything Mikana had told them. According to Yuuga, during a certain battle, Mikana tried to abandon Cecilia. Even though everything turned out fine in the end, that only happened because the priestess managed to save herself. In any case, the hero sees the mage's attitude as extremely cruel, and the resentment he feels toward his teammate is written all over his face. Irritated by the leader's behavior, Yauki says that it wasn't Mikana's fault that Cecilia was left behind. Yuuga replies that Yauki wasn't even there to know, so realizing he can't say too much, Yauki claims he heard it from Mikana herself. From what he learned, she wasn't the one who left Cecilia behind. It was a powerful demon the group couldn't defeat for the life of them, even after facing it day after day. Yuuga argues that Mikana accepted the offer, which is clear proof that she hates Cecilia. But Yauki points out that the mage was crying out of guilt towards Cecilia. Yuuga insists that it was Mikana's fault because she agreed to it. So the demon snaps and tells the coward to remember what really happened. Cecilia herself asked her comrades to leave her behind, and the final decision was made by the leader Yuuga. Even knowing the guy is right, Yuuga throws a tantrum and refuses to accept the truth, stammering that Mikana was still mostly to blame. Seeing that his partner is losing his temper, Raven touches Yuuga's shoulder and gives him a look that says, "Man, that's enough, just admit it." Then, remembering that the guy is the hero, Yauki tells him to act like one and take responsibility for the things he does instead of blaming his own teammates. After all, if he can't do the bare minimum, then Yuuga is pathetic. Upon hearing that, believe it or not, Yuuga starts crying like a child in the middle of the restaurant, catching the attention of all the other customers who turn directly toward their table. As if he were really trying to calm down a kid, Yauki admits he went too far, and the crybaby calms down and apologizes for losing his composure. Then he explains that he and Mikana have been friends since childhood, and she was always a hard-working and dedicated girl, always lecturing Yuuga whenever he did something wrong. Of course, she always had his best interests at heart, since the two were always together, and if there was one thing young Yuuga could count on, it was the support of his great friend, who stayed by his side even when he became a hero a very difficult time in his life. Even so, despite acknowledging everything Mikana did for him, he still had the nerve to blame her for what happened with Cecilia, even though, in the end, the final decision had indeed been his. Confused, Yuuga asks what he should do to make up with the mage, and Yauki tells him he should accept another lecture like in the old days, because maybe this time he'll swallow his pride and learn something from it. Convinced that this is the right thing to do, Yuuga gets excited to apologize to his friend right now, but not alone, of course, so he ends up dragging the two companions at the table with him. As if that weren't enough, The great hero arrives at Mikana's house holding hands with the two of them like a child. Out of patience, Yaoki pulls his hand away, and Yuuga asks the two friends to wait outside, because from now on he will resolve this on his own. When the grown man enters the house, Yaoki smiles, thinking it will be worth losing some time from his visit to Cecilia if Yuuga gets close to Mikana again. However, what they hear from inside the house is an ear-splitting scream from the mage, who had her room invaded by the hero while she was changing clothes. Acting as if nothing had happened, the guy touches his friend's shoulders and, even though she was only in her underwear, admits he was seriously wrong to blame her in Cecilia's case. And because of that, he demands to be reprimanded right away for hurting her feelings. Taking in the situation, him entering her room like that while she was almost undressed. Asking to be scolded, Mikana asks if he's trying to ask for something he doesn't know how to say. Yuuga does everything he can to prove he isn't, but it's already too late, because Mikana has already grabbed her huge wooden staff to punish the team's leader the way he wanted. Hearing from outside that everything ended in the best possible way, Yaoki runs to Cecilia's mansion to meet the woman of his life. On the way, the same fortune-telling lady asks for the boy's attention again, but he once more turns down her service so he can hurry to Cecilia. With him gone, the old woman says the boy's luck has changed, and he must have done something very important for that to happen. Farther along, the girl from the sweets shop who had left work early stops Yaoki in the street to apologize for her brother giving him squashed pastries earlier, and as compensation she gives him a new one. Right after, a group of strange men surrounds Yaoki, who already wonders what kind of trouble happened now. However, instead of anything bad, the butler of the skewer kid apologizes for losing sight of the young master, and as a reward for Yaoki having taken care of him, the man hands the boy an envelope. As soon as he arrives at the mansion, Yaoki is scolded by Happiness, who wasn't as happy as his name suggests, since the guest had arrived late. On the other hand, Cecilia was as dazzling as always and in a great mood, since the two hadn't seen each other in a long time. To improve the atmosphere, Yaoki gives the gifts he had just received to his beloved. In this case, pastries and skewers, a strange combination, according to Cecilia, who uses the food as an excuse to prepare some tea. Yaoki asks if that isn't the servant's job, but the girl proudly says she learned from Sophia, including how to cook, which makes the boy fall even more in love. As they continue talking, he tells her all the news, like the fact that Happiness and Raven are now friends, and that Yuuga and Mikana have made up. However, as soon as that was said, Yuuga suddenly barges into Cecilia's room, and after admitting he realized his mistake, he asks her to scold him. Instead, he gets punched in the face by Mikana, who was right behind him, since he had completely misunderstood everything. In truth, Raven was also there, and the reason all three of them came was to apologize to the group's priestess. Getting straight to the point, Mikana says she abandoned her friend that day, but the other two stop her and take the blame, saying they were the ones who were useless for leaving Cecilia behind with that terrifying demon. Cecilia, in turn, says that everything is fine, especially because she wasn't the only one who risked her life. She even mentions how hard it must have been for them to face the demon lord without a healer. Right after the hero's party defeated the Dark Lord, Mikana ran back as fast as she could, hoping Cecilia was still safe, and the priestess never forgot that. In Cecilia's view, that was the only way for them to move forward, so she clearly states that Mikana isn't at fault at all. Hearing that, the mage feels an enormous weight lifted from her shoulders. In the end, the entire group reconciles, and everything is good between them again. After this conversation, Cecilia ends up alone with Yaoki in the forest beside her house. She learns that he was the one who suggested the others talk to her, so she thanks him for everything he has done, especially for becoming a friend to her family and to her companions, which makes him feel more and more like a part of this world, and particularly a part of her world. Feeling shy, Yaoki gives her the necklace he had wanted to give her for a long time, reminding her that it's the exact same one from their first meeting. Ironically, when the girl accepts the gift, he is the one who starts crying and thanking her, and Cecilia finds it amusing. She even reflects on how much more fun her life has become since she met Yaoki. Meanwhile, in other parts of the world, not everyone is having such a lucky day. In a certain village, a group of bandits invades and sets the area on fire while searching for valuables, even threatening to use the women and children for horrific purposes. At that moment, a swordsman appears and kills the bandit leader with a single strike, along with his two henchmen who attack him right after. Despite the supposedly heroic deed, the man acts as if he's completely fed up with everything. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.